Hello friends, I'm Susan, and I'm happy to be here with you today. The topic for my talk is the central spiritual dilemma, integration. And I'm going to explain what that means and why. But I'll say beforehand that my sister recently died. It wasn't unexpected. She'd had cancer and completed a round of chemo in May. And in June, after the chemo was finished, there were several serious complications. And a few weeks ago, I visited her and her husband, my brother-in-law, in Portland, Oregon. And it turns out that that visit was just a week and a half before she died. So these past weeks have been especially intense. And the focus of my talk now is I want to talk about these past weeks, but I'm not going to be talking about grieving or about death and dying. I want to talk instead, as I said, about a spiritual dilemma, the central spiritual dilemma, which in fact I hadn't realized while I was experiencing it, or at least for part of the time. So before I go any further, I thought, let me explain what this dilemma is. In spiritual training, we are told to counter wholesome and unwholesome self-criticism, judgment, on two levels. The first level is our everyday level, conventional level that we all know we live on, our daily life. And how do we do that in our spiritual practice? Well, you all know. Mindfulness and self-compassion. We bring those to ourselves. And certainly here at IMCC we talk about that often. But there's a second level as well, and we talk about that as well. At least I'm talking about it tonight. And that's in the realm of the transcendent. We can call it divine mystery. We can call it, and it has been called, the Buddha nature, or simply pure awareness. In later years, the Buddha didn't use the word, by the way, pure awareness. He used several others, but not that. But I'll talk about it as pure awareness. When we rest in pure awareness, there is no self-judgment. It's not why we do it, but the fact of the simply non-existence of self-judgment in pure awareness is a byproduct of resting there. So let me say more about that, explaining what I mean here, natural awareness. I think we all have, when we're quiet, when we all have that yearning, when we really look deeply inside, and the sense that something's missing. No matter how lovely life is, and it is at moments, there comes again, time and again, that something is missing. There's a hole here. There needs to be more. We long for a peace and a harmony, a love that is, more stable. We'd love to live from that. And ultimately, this is what the Buddhist practice is about. It is about learning to live from this deeper inner place that we all long for. There are many words that he used. And I have to be honest, I think many of them are off-putting to us this day and age. Let's remember it was 2,500 years ago. And he talked about the unconditioned, the unformed, the unborn, the uncreated, deathlessness. Those actually I don't think have much appeal to the heart. And in fact, they can be pretty off-putting, like, good grief, what's that? He also talked about unsatisfactoriness, that life is unsatisfactory, and that we understand. But he meant it unsatisfactory not only on our everyday level, but it's unsatisfactory in that we don't usually live from that level that he most deeply was pointing to, and that is natural awareness, pure awareness. So that's what I want to talk about now, this natural awareness, the pure awareness, that which always exists. It never doesn't exist. We don't have to merit it. You don't have to be good enough. You don't have to practice hard enough or long enough. You don't have to have umpteen hours on a meditation cushion or chair in retreats. None of that is necessary. It's helpful, it can be helpful, but it isn't necessary because you already are it. Whether you're good or bad, or energetic, or feeling really tired and lazy, it's always there. This natural awareness is without boundaries. It is simply has no conflict. It is universal. And in that, being without conflict, it is love. Not the hearts and flowers kind of love, but simply that which encompasses all without conflict. I will say, you've experienced it. And somebody may say, oh no, not I. But in fact you have. And it's in those moments, a nanosecond between thoughts, that which always exists is it. It is so simple and so quiet that we usually miss it. We haven't noticed it. Why? Because we're very busy with our lives on the conventional level, what we have to do and be and say and so forth. So, I'll say that in spiritual circles, across the ages, across cultures, there has been a sense of separation. The everyday level on the one hand, and pure awareness on the other, natural awareness on the other hand, sound like two separate things, don't they? And that's what I will say, that people have had diverse and sometimes really conflicting opinions about it over the cultures, over the ages. People tend to get into different camps according to what their experience is. People who are invested deeply in daily life, and maybe skillfully with mindfulness and loving kindness and so forth, can be very much invested. We can be really invested, like, this is right, this is the way. And of course it is. It is the way. And people who are really into non-duality can say, hey, wait a minute, into natural awareness can say, wait a minute, this is the way. On the one hand, those in everyday life will say, oh no, natural awareness, that's like la la land. It's irrelevant, it's impractical, we don't know what it is, and that's the one hand. And those who are in merging in natural awareness, may say, oh no, everyday life isn't it. We've bypassed that. In short, what I'm getting to is it comes down to something like spiritual culture wars throughout the ages, one side versus the other. I'll say that truly great spiritual individuals have known that it's both. It's both and not either or. Both the everyday life on the one hand, and also on the other hand, non-awareness. Both are realms of reality. Both are reality. And we as human beings are called to live fully in both, to fully experience and understand both. And the big question is, where do they intersect? It can feel like they're so different. How do they intersect? So the intersection between daily life and natural awareness, where is it? How do we find that? The both and. How do we live that? Before I try to point in some direction that may, I hope, make sense, let me say the relationship between the two, between these two realms of realities, it can sound like it's two sides of a coin. Okay, on one hand there is everyday conventional reality that we all know and live, and on the other hand there is the natural awareness. Two separate things. So they sound, okay, even if we admit both are reality, it sounds like they're just two sides of the coin. One is one, every day, and the other one is the transcendent, and two separate sides of the coin. No, it's not like that. It's actually like a wave in the ocean. The ocean is that which always is. Natural awareness always exists. Some people have other names for it. Consciousness, divine mystery, whatever. It always is. It never is not. no matter what is happening or where. It always is. And we as individuals are like the waves. We're here now. We lap up against the shore as waves do, and then eventually we disappear into the ocean, back to where we came from. It always is. Living from that place of natural awareness, the effect of it is that it integrates more into our daily life. There's a greater sense of peace and love and happiness. So this is what we ask ourselves, how do we integrate them? Let me say that the great paradox is they already are integrated. Like, wow, big secret. They are integrated. We don't really have to do anything. And that's so hard for us to understand. The mind cannot accept it. It sounds like it's impossible, but ultimately that's true. They already are integrated, just like a wave is part of the ocean. So now I'll get back to my own personal story and say that in the days before I left to visit my sister and brother-in-law in Portland, Oregon, I forgot that these two realms are naturally integrated. And I'll say that the central spiritual dilemma that I'm talking about arose for me with a real vengeance because I experienced them as very, very separate. So the days before my visit, of course, I was worrying about my sister. I knew that this was probably close to the end of her life. And I grieved in ways that affected just about everything I did. There was just a heaviness about everything in my belly and my way I did things. Everything was hard. Everything seemed to be difficult to do, even things that generally were simple. It was like going through mud. It was pretty overwhelming at that time. And I was doing rather simple things, actually, but they didn't feel that way. So I knew, of course, that this was grieving. But, and here comes where the issue for me part of the issue for me came in. I criticized myself, self-judgment. I thought, I should be doing better. I shouldn't be experiencing the heaviness I'm experiencing. Grief, yes, I know that was natural. And and that happens on our everyday level. And probably all of us have experienced it. But at the same time, I thought, I'm a teacher. And I talk a lot about natural awareness. I should be living from natural awareness. And so I thought, I'm not doing it right. And there's a lot of self-criticism there. Like, people expect me to be able to do that. I expect me to be able to do that. What if they knew that I'm not doing that? So I'm telling you all right now, I didn't do it a lot. So I'll tell you what I did do. On the one hand, I was doing my mindfulness and self-compassion practice, which I just mentioned to you now because I think there's something in there that might be useful. It has been for me for a long time. Not only being mindful of what I'm experiencing, but bringing self-compassion in the form of my inner dialogue. I use an endearment a lot. Darling to myself. It's one of my favorite endearments. Or it could be honey or dear one or whatever. Usually it's darling. When I was feeling really down, I would say, it's okay, darling. You can't darling yourself too much, and I offer that to you. That's been my experience. Offer yourself that softness of the love. It's really important, and I was doing that. And in addition, on the other hand, on this everyday level, the relative level, I was merging with natural awareness, often, simply letting go. And in when that happened, there was no criticism. But, having said all of that, and there's a big but here, and that is, it wasn't continual. The self-criticism came back. The natural awareness of the sense of merging with it would come back. I'd fall into self-criticism again. It was, didn't seem to be able to get rid of it. And my mind kept going back, I'm not doing a good job and not doing this well enough. And then came an insight. And the insight was, came a moment during all of this, and this was before I visited her, my sister. I stepped back for a moment and just looked at all that I had been doing in working with this, the grief, the sense of failure with regard to natural awareness. And I realized, wait a minute, stepping back, that all of it already is part of the same thing. All the criticism and the distress and the confusion, all of that is part of natural awareness. Nothing is aside from it. I forgot. And what I was doing was I was making a distinction that the natural awareness was good, but the self-criticism at not being able to do it well enough was bad. The falling into every day, into the confusion and the self-criticism was bad. Good and bad. This is not wisdom on any level, and it was forgetting that ultimately natural awareness and everyday life are like a wave and the ocean. When I step back and realize that there already is an integration, they're not two separate things, that was a tremendous insight, which I offer to you, because don't we always become well experienced in our self-criticism when we can rest in what we most deeply are? There, right there. And even when we are criticizing ourselves, even that is self-criticism. That is natural awareness. So I wanted to quote recently, as I was preparing for this talk, a comment by the English mystic at 14th century English mystic, Julian of Norwich. She commented something that she saw or heard in a vision from Jesus. And he said, "And all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well. All manner of things shall be well." And of course, he wasn't simply talking about circumstances, because we all know this is not true. All manner of things are often very not well. But ultimately, and this is what he was pointing to, ultimately, all manner of things shall be well. And this is what Julian was talking about. Can we remember that? It is already well, even amid circumstances that are distressing, where there's grief, where there's sorrow. Going deeper, recognizing the love within us, that which is already. So, I'll just summarize here. I've said a lot more about myself than I usually say in this talk. So in case you missed it, the real focus of the talk was to highlight an example, my own experience, that highlighted the central dilemma that we, when we're on the spiritual path and go deeper into it, come across. And that is, how do we integrate what can seem to be two separate realms of reality? Remember, they already are integrated. They already are. And if you don't know this, or you feel like, wow, what does that even mean? Not to worry. Because first of all, they already are integrated. Yes. And listen. Inviting you to listen to the deepest sense within you. Listening to that deepest sense, listening to that voice within you, listening to the yearning that we all have in the deep stillness, the yearning for the something more. And when you listen to that yearning, just relax, let go, experience it, even if for a moment. This is not about prolonging something for hours. Just experience it directly, what already is. The poet Rumi, the Sufi poet Rumi, said, Let your soul be drawn by the stronger pull of what you already are. Let your soul be drawn by the stronger pull of what you already are. We don't have to worry. You can't lose it. You're it. It's a matter of finding it. So, again, if any of these words are confusing, just listen inwardly and don't worry. Thank you for your practice.